We are now on to the second part of the cardiovascular system. We just finished blood and learning all the components within your blood. We're now going to learn about the heart. The third component is going to be learning about blood vessels. So to begin, I think we know what our heart is for. It's a powerful muscle that pumps blood throughout the cardiovascular system. If you recall from A&P1, you learned about the differences between the three types of muscle. You learned that heart muscle is striated, which means it has these stripes within the cells due to overlapping protein filaments. It's involuntary, meaning you don't have to and cannot consciously control the heart. And that these cells are a certain shape. They're kind of a branched looking muscle cell, and they connect with one another in order to allow electrical current to pass through the muscle cells. We're going to look a little more at that when we get to the physiology component. But to begin, we talk about the anatomy of the heart. We start by learning about its location. If you recall, there's a region or a sub-region in your chest called the mediastinum. And the mediastinum, by definition, is the area between your lungs, below the neck, and above your diaphragm. So the heart is located in the mediastinum. Even better, the heart is located in the pericardium, which is a sub-region within the mediastinum. The heart has some general features. You'll notice that most of that heart is sitting towards the left. And in fact, it produces what we call a cardiac notch within your left lung. So your left lung is slightly smaller than your right due to the position of the heart. And we're going to learn that the reason why the heart's positioned more on the left is that it has a large left ventricle. You can also see this large left ventricle in this transverse plane through the heart. This transverse plane is viewed from below, so we're looking up at the heart. So when you look up at the heart, this would be the left side of the heart, this would be the right side of the heart. Positioned in between your lungs, posterior to the sternum, so the sternum or breastbone is protecting the heart. It lies anterior to your vertebrae. They show the sixth thoracic vertebra. We're going to be learning some large blood vessels that bring blood into the heart or bring blood out of the heart. So the heart is dealing with two different kinds of blood. It's getting oxygenated blood from your lungs and pumping that blood throughout the body. But it's also getting deoxygenated blood, blood that already was distributed throughout the body and has to now return to the heart. So the heart is dealing with two separate circuits. The pulmonary circuit, which is sending blood to and from the lungs, and then the systemic circuit, which is the circuit that distributes oxygenated blood to all tissues of the body. So we typically will begin by learning about layers of the heart before we actually get to the heart chambers and the heart valves and blood flow. So your heart lies within a serous membrane. The serous membrane is known as the pericardium, the serous pericardium. Serous pericardium is a double membrane. It has two layers to it with fluid in between. So a lot of times we use this analogy as if there's kind of a bag of fluid that the heart is pushed down into, and that bag of fluid wraps around your heart. So this represents the serous pericardium with two layers, a layer adhering to the heart, known as the visceral layer, and a layer lining the inner wall called the parietal layer. Even surrounding the serous pericardium, there's a layer called the fibrous pericardium. The fibrous pericardium is much more protective to the heart. It's made of a lot of tough connective tissue. And what the fibrous pericardium does is it prevents that heart from overstretching. It kind of stabilizes the heart, it protects the heart, and anchors the heart within the thoracic cavity or within the mediastinum. So that's a very important layer even before you get to the serous pericardium and even before you get to the actual heart itself. So looking at the pericardium, there's a fibrous layer. Then we should be able to make out the two double layers of the serous pericardium, one being the parietal layer here, then a small little space filled with fluid called the pericardial cavity, then the visceral pericardium. And I'll remind you what visceral means. Visceral means an internal organ. The internal organ is the heart. So this visceral layer of the serous pericardium is physically attached to the heart. In fact, it's quite often thought of as the outer layer of the heart. So that layer has two names. You'll notice both of these lines are pointing to the exact same, very thin, very delicate outer layer of the heart. It's the visceral layer of the serous pericardium. It's also known as the epicardium because it's the outer layer of the heart. This layer is very smooth. It reduces friction because we don't need friction developing when the heart is pumping. So it's a very smooth, slick outer surface of the heart. Then we get to the myocardium. I'll remind you that myo means muscle. So this is all the cardiac muscle of the wall of the heart. And there's some areas where this wall is thick. There's some areas where it's thinner. But that provides the force necessary to pump blood. Then the inner lining of the heart chambers is known as the endocardium. And that's another very slick, very smooth surface because that's where the blood is going to be moving. So there's a lot of different layers. We have to keep them straight somewhat. But the best way is to move from the outermost, fibrous, hit the serous, hit the myocardium, and then the endocardium. Inflammation of these layers is called pericarditis. If it was just inflammation of the endocardium, it's endocarditis. If it's just inflammation of the muscle, it's myocarditis, which can occur. Bacterial infections can infect these layers, viral infections, and obviously infection of the heart is a very dangerous situation. So any form of inflammation typically ends in an itis. So inflammation of the pericardium is pericarditis. The next video we're going to look at the heart chambers and learn the four chambers of our heart, start to piece together blood flow within the heart, and learn about the valves that regulate proper blood flow.